Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The Pagan Viewpoint. This episode is pre-recorded, so if you're watching this on Premiere and YouTube, thanks so much for coming. We're not actually here. So,
No.
I've been in way too many streams.
But make sure to leave a get well soon comment. My buddy over here, because he is going to be needing that on Friday. That is something he's definitely going to be needing.
Yeah, spine surgery day. Because we were pre-recording because I leave in the morning to go do a bunch of the pre-op stuff, all the fun stuff for spine surgery on Friday. And I'll be taking a hiatus for a couple of weeks. And
so by the time you guys see this, he's already going to be in there. Leave all the good comments.
Yeah. So, and I just wanted to preface to make sure that everyone's aware this is a recording because I've been in way too many VODs. You start trying to talk to people and then you realize they're not actually live, which is the worst. So, full really transparency. This week is pre-recorded and Alyssa's taking over some content creation for a couple of weeks. A bunch of fun little stuff here and there. Not full shows. It's a lot to carry a full show by yourself.
Keep y'all entertained about little subjects here and there now and just to keep it going. I cannot currently hold the weight of this entire show on my tiny little shoulders just yet. So
someone who has
we'll be doing what we can.
Yeah, someone who's carried my own podcast before. Getting an hour's worth of content just straight up recorded when you have no team behind you at all is a lot of work.
And my biggest app is not YouTube, it is TikTok, which is 1 minute snippets. But that times 20. We're gonna do it. We're gonna pull it off.
Right? Yeah, because even already we've shared a lot of information and we're only 2 minutes in, and and so 60 minutes that's a lot. So pre-recorded and then a bunch of little content, and I might check in perhaps on TikTok a bit on the Pagan Viewpoint TikTok while I'm recovering in the hospital. We'll see.
That would be good.
We'll see how I feel. It'll be fun. Or you can always check out my personal TikTok as well. And but kind of in the spirit of surgeries and healthcare and all stuff, there's a topic that we're going to talk about this week, which is one that's been dogging me for years. And in the past week or so, I've gotten in a couple heated debates with people. So that topic is single payer, why the U.S. insurance system is a complete and total scam.
And I've been sitting here just for years and years and years thinking that exact same thing. I have had my own mother look me in the face and tell me basic health care is a privilege, not a right. And I'm just like, she is chronically ill. She could use some single payer health care, and she'd rather push the foot. I don't understand.
Yeah, this is something that has been a real thorn in my side for a long time. It was someone born with a life-threatening genetic illness. Regular preventative health care is literally a necessity for me to stay alive. Totaling in the $20,000 to $40,000 annually in medical expenses. Just on the average, that's just a maintenance monitoring year is between $20,000 and $40,000 in medical billing annually.
$20,000 and $40,000 of medical billing is absolutely horrible. Because I know most American families with median income, they do not have that leeway. They don't have the anything. Maybe a few $100s if they're lucky. If they've been very careful to prepare and save.
The median income in the U.S. and trust me, it's already quite skewed by a few very, very large earners. Is around $55,000 gross annually. Pre-tax, all that stuff. $40,000 in medical expenses. With yeah, so insurance is a must. Like there's almost zero individuals who could afford to pay that once, much less every year from the time they're 10 years old until the day they die. And that's not including, in 2020, I racked up $750,000 in medical bills, and I'm about to rack up in 3 days probably about another $200,000.
You know what? That's about the price of the land that I've been looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Like from $100,000 to $750,000. You know, how much can you get for that much money in just the form of acreage?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of insane. And so the reason that, like in Americans, by and large, whether they agree with single payer or not, they all agree that the U.S. healthcare system is vastly overpriced. But a lot of people, they react to the concept of government-run healthcare, and they're just like, socialism bad. But the big
my mother was willing to go all the way to Mexico to get her dental in because she couldn't afford it in the American healthcare system, and still looked me in the face and told me that healthcare is a privilege, not a right.
Yeah, healthcare is essential to your life, and your life is one of the few things guaranteed to you by the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The government's biggest purpose, and what it actually does, is to make sure that you have first and foremost your life, then your liberty, and then the ability to pursue happiness on top of that.
Yeah.
And
now, see, and the thing is, though, I think that a lot of people say it like that, and that really, in a way, I think it detriments the actual meaning of the pursuit of happiness being protected, because basically, I think of the pursuit of happiness more pertaining to this than the protection of your life, because your life is your life, right? But if you are not capable of pursuing happiness, if something is systematically in your way and preventing you from pursuing that happiness, well, then what's the point?
Yeah, well, and that's
so
why,
if you don't have the health care you need because you can't afford it and you're working your whole life just be broke and live.
Yeah, well, and that's where it comes down to the fact,
hard.
Like, our founders took the time to rank them. They're in order, of most important to least important. And
last but not least is the thing there. It's most important to your immediate survival. Once your immediate survival is taken care of, for sure, that is when you go towards the pursuit of happiness.
Because
but
life
the pursuit of happiness
and liberty
is the goal to get to. Because if you have life and you have liberty, but you cannot pursue happiness, then what is the point of the life and the liberty?
Yeah. The fact is that the only way you can seek fulfillment, which is happiness, like happiness and fulfillment are basically identical, and like the only way you can do that is you have is if you're alive, and you have liberty. The prerequisites.
And obviously, I'm just saying those two don't stand up without the third.
Yeah,
but they're not enough.
But the big thing is the ability to pursue.
Required, and it's been.
Yeah. Well, the ability to pursue happiness is predicated on actual liberty, and if you're constantly scrounging for money to pay for your health care, you don't have liberty.
You're literally not capable of pursuing happiness.
And so you're not liberated at that point.
No.
And it's the same if you're constantly segregated.
If you have a life, well, what is life? Do they mean life as in just living, or do they mean quality of life? Because quality of life is a big difference from just life. And if you don't agree with that, you have never been chronically ill.
Yeah. And it's a bit off topic. Like, kind of, skewed a little bit, but like it's important to talk about the fact like the government has basically one purpose, in my opinion, and it's basically to ensure that you live in an environment that you can actually pursue fulfillment, and
Well, yeah.
like, and that's it. That's what government's job is. So, like, because that's what we as a society, because government is just society combined. That's what government should be, and that's what we should. All the biggest thing the government should be doing, and that expands into a lot of activities, like ensuring adequate infrastructure, opportunities for education and growth, as well as the ability to actually stay alive, which includes defense, of course, like actually keeping your country and environment safe, but also ensuring that, when you happen to be born with something you have no control over, you don't just die, or they protect you from pandemics, which they've been failing at.
Well, I mean, that and there's food shortages. We have things in place that can be implemented in the case of food shortages. So all of those things that are necessary for you to be able to be alive are most certainly necessary. The way that I see it, American culture, from the get-go, has been lead, follow, or get out of my way. Because we're going to get this done.
What's really interesting.
Pretty much, we're just like, we're fine until we're not. And we will not admit it a moment beforehand.
Yeah, what's really interesting about the U.S.
And so it's like, I mentioned, go ahead, but I mentioned that for a reason.
Sorry, no, you go ahead and finish your point.
What I've noticed is that this really does end up feeding into that mentality of, no, we don't need health care. No, we're fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. A lot of people are saying, like, it feels as though it's a handout. It feels as though they've had to work so hard to be able to afford it to this point, and that if they wipe that out, that then what was that? And I just feel like
you're scammed.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Scammed. So
you were scammed by capitalism.
But continuing the scam and making it so that we are being scammed as well does not lessen your scam.
Yeah, like I actually just saw a political cartoon today, which is a trolley on a tracks.
Copy and pasting. My point is, they're copy and pasting that American mentality of let's just get it done, put your shoulders to the wheel, make it happen.
Yeah.
And they're putting it somewhere it doesn't belong. And I feel like a lot of times they are taking that third point there, the pursuit of happiness, and they're just sort of wiping it away, because it seems as though, that's what you pay attention to after the first two. But I feel like there are a lot of people who they lose track of what true liberty is if they don't have that ability that it's just that their sights on them happening. So I feel like a lot of people are losing their way, and they're losing sight of it being a right, and that is something that everyone should have. And I don't think they're really, really going to see it until after it's been fully implemented. And that's wrong.
Well, because, like, there's a lot of interesting, like, the first government-run healthcare for private citizens in this country was in the 1790s. Like we required federal healthcare, federally run healthcare for seafarers, because they didn't want basically like disease getting into the country, and so every merchant on a U.S. vessel like had to pay for through taxation a government run healthcare system that then they didn't have to pay for when they went, like they paid through taxes, and they were required to use it to stay healthy. Like the founders supported universal healthcare, because it made sense.
I actually have another fun historical fact that somewhat loosely connects to this, because it is one of the reasons, the anecdote that my mother gave, and that several other fans have given, as an example as to why they don't want the government involved with their health care. And that is that in Texas, up until around, I don't even remember exactly when, the 60s, there was a brothel. And this brothel was very well run. It was extremely popular. All the girls were cared for. Nobody paid attention to it, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, the United States government went in and had to find a reason to shut it down. They just found a reason. Instead of shutting it down, they confiscated it under tax evasion laws and then began running the brothel themselves in order to make up the money that was owed for the taxes on that brothel, and it immediately went out of business. And so the anecdote that they give, my various family members, is if they can't even run a whorehouse, why would I want them to run my health?
Yeah.
And it makes sense from that perspective.
Because people don't understand how government works.
And that's so people get stripped up. Well, so many people get hooked up on that, and I'm just like, okay, but if the government is running something that they themselves are saying is illegal, wouldn't going there constitute entrapment? And so then wouldn't people not want to go there? And then so wouldn't
there's a broader issue
at point work anyway?
With it anyway, which is people misunderstand the purpose of government, and they have for a long time. Government isn't supposed to make a profit. Government isn't supposed to run like a business. Government provides services.
Never supposed to. And my mother and her family are the side that think that government should have been run like a business, which is why every single one of them voted for Trump.
Yeah, and when government runs like a business, government fails at its job spectacularly, because then it has to try to cut as many benefits and expenses as possible. The government should always lose money on everything it does. Yeah. Because otherwise it's just pilfering profit off of you. Which means that it's not serving you, which means it's just a business and not a government.
It's supposed to be, I don't think it's so much supposed to lose. I think we could probably phrase that better. I think that it's supposed to grow. It just transits there. It's supposed to say this goes here and that goes there and this goes there, but it's never supposed to have an actual total there. Yeah. Of how much money they themselves.
Well, because like the big thing is like they have to keep track of how much they spend. But even like the USPS, for example, is the only government agency, one of the only government agencies mandated by the Constitution. And and people for years have been saying the USPS should make money. No, the USPS is meant to serve as literally the ability to share information nationwide to all areas of the country. Which is one
of the reasons why it's extremely important to me that they continue to be funded. So I have a P.O. box. Yeah. If anyone wants to send me a greeting card, it is 251 Jacksonville, Arkansas 72078. That is Alyssa Ravenwood. It is spelled just as it sounds. So support your local post office. Send me a greeting card.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Is it provides a service. It's not supposed to make money. Yeah. It can try to recoup some of its costs, etc. Needs should be responsible with our money.
They don't fund it completely.
But
they should definitely not be making a profit.
But it shouldn't make a profit, and so that's where that's why the U.S. insurance system is a scam. Because insurance companies, and by extension many healthcare providers, their job is they're a business, and the job of a business is to make profit for its owners or shareholders, and as well as its other stakeholders, so employees, businesses they contract with, etc. So that's the purpose of a business, is to make more money. I actually don't begrudge any business that. That's what businesses exist to do. They exist to make money and provide a service in exchange for making money. That's why businesses exist. Every business. But the reason that the U.S. health insurance system then is a scam is because the reason that businesses in a market economy work is because consumers have choice. which means they can choose not to buy something. You know what you can't choose? The fact that you need healthcare to live. So they have a service that people have no choice but to buy, by the very nature of being alive. There's no choice there. And without any choice...
If it's required for you to live and you then have to buy it to survive, it's a scam. You should not have to pay for anything that's required for human survival.
Yeah. And therefore then by that extension, like, they charge as much as they possibly can to squeeze money out of you for profit, and do everything they can to avoid doing what you actually pay them for, which is pay for your health care, because that increases their expenses, which decreases their profit. Which,
so,
like I said, I don't, the thing is, I'm not mad at the insurance company for doing this.
No.
That's what it's responsible for them to do.
It's a stupid system.
Yeah, it's a system that doesn't make sense. It's not a matter
of it being angry. Stating a fact doesn't make you angry. The system is stupid.
Yeah, because that's the thing.
It's killing people.
Yeah, because I like to really push back against people, because they say, oh, you must just hate people making money. No. I run a business. I like people making money.
I love when people make money, because then they have more money to spend on my stuff. I just don't like them making money on the blood of humanity. I don't care for that. And
so that's why, like I was using this example. I was talking to Alyssa before the show about this. It's something I've talked to a lot of people about, which is the median American spends greater than 10% of their gross annual income on health insurance and deductibles. On the low end. On the low end. Yeah. And just to break that in perspective, the median income in the U.S., the last time I looked, which I think was numbers were for like 2017, was about $55,000 annually gross. Trust me, like, most people right now could pull up their health insurance, and they're probably paying more than $5,500 a year between their premiums and their deductibles. Premiums, they're probably paying close to that annually. Even without then the deductibles, which is your out-of-pocket expenses once you even bother to try to use your care in your health insurance. And so once you start to add that up, like 10% is probably on the low end. Plus now you have to worry about networks, you have to worry about surprise billing, you have to worry about approvals or disapprovals, constantly arguing with insurance agents, because their job is to do everything impossible to deny you care, not actually help you. And so,
and I mean, that's the saddest part. Because I have a friend, for example, she has type 1 diabetes, and she's had it since she was very, very young, insulin dependent, and it has costing her nearly $1,000 a month to be able to stay in insulin for herself. That's not even including her son. But they need it to live. And it is nowhere near as expensive in almost any other country on the...
about $60 a month.
So why is it so expensive here?
Profit. And that's it. Companies make profit off of your lives. And so that's why I bring the fact, like, okay, cool, your taxes go up if we have a single payer system. Like, anyone who says they're not going to, like, they might be trying to, like, figure out a way that it's not going to, but just accept the fact that taxes are going to go up. And that's okay.
They will.
Because
they're gonna.
Because the fact is you can remove profit. Like, look at this way. Health insurance companies employ more people who are not medical professionals to deny you care than they provide people, than they have any medical professional on staff researching what care you actually need.
The thing is, I can absolutely guarantee you that I have never met a medical professional that I would see twice who actually wanted the insurance company. Most of the ones that I actually got real care from want the single payer, because then they won't have some insurance company coming back and saying, no, I'm sorry, that procedure's not covered. The one procedure that's going to do what you needed to do, right? That's not covered.
Yeah, and
They get so
so imagine
angry at
paying.
that.
You already pay more than 10% of your income annually. Like that's a given. For
Mm.
95 to 99, if they're lucky enough to have insurance. If you're lucky enough to have
Yeah.
insurance, most
Yeah.
often employer sponsored, so you have to have a job that even provides the health insurance, which actually a lot of
So
Americans
that's a trip
don't,
and a half the fun.
because a lot of employers are too small to have too few employees to be required to provide insurance, and honestly, they can't afford
The
it. They
vast
can't afford it.
majority, they don't have full-time employees anymore now, because if you're full-time, you have to provide insurance,
Yeah,
and so they're
and so
scheduling them for 39 hours.
yeah, and so if you're
There's 1 hour below, and they don't have to provide you insurance.
yeah, and so if you're one of the Americans lucky enough to have employer-sponsored health insurance, and the odds are you're making way less than the median income of $55,000 a year. You're probably making $15 an hour, for the reference, on a full-time job annually is $31,600 a year.
Yeah.
And trust me, median, like, you're definitely paying a lot more than 10% of your gross annual income for health insurance then. So imagine paying 10% in taxes annually and never having to worry about a deductible or a network or approvals or denials ever again. Hospital staff,
Yeah.
administration staff would be massively cut because they wouldn't have to deal with insurance, or overdue
Imagine
bills.
going into the doctor. Imagine going into the doctor for something that just whatever, and instead of thinking, "Oh my God, this is gonna cause me," all you're really thinking of is, "I really give me a prescription for this blank thing."
Yep.
Like, can you imagine how much lighter that would be
Oh yeah,
for you
definitely.
when you're already sick?
Yeah. Like I've reached that point myself, but only because my annual health expenses are so expensive every year that I reach my deductible every year, so I know exactly how much money I'm gonna have to pay in billing towards our health insurance every year, which is about $7,000 annually, and we pay that every year, which basically means we put $200 every 2 weeks into an HSA, plus $2,000 we get from an employer, and it literally just goes towards medical expenses every year. But now I get to walk into every doctor's office and know that, not care about how much it costs, because I'm going to meet my deductible anyway, and it's a fixed cost for me. But a lot of Americans aren't like that. They don't meet their deductibles annually every year. So they're like 40% of Americans before the pandemic could not afford a $400 emergency, much less a $5,000 medical emergency. And that's just the medical bills.
Yeah.
Not to mention travel costs, time off work, hotels, food, if you have to travel for your medical care.
And since you brought that up, everyone's all saying this, like, oh, well, if people would just get their insurance and actually keep insurance, they wouldn't have to worry about it. The funny thing is, though, is that for the people who do not meet their deductible, if they have a medical emergency, that basically means the entire medical emergency is all just dropped on their head. Without insurance or not, they're probably paying. They're still going to end up bankrupt.
Exactly, and so that's why.
So the insurance didn't do any good anyway.
Yeah, so that's why the insurance industry in the U.S. is a scam. It makes almost $60 billion a year in profit across all health insurance companies, and that's purely just excess money that they're charging you. That's it. It's excess. They're charging you more than the healthcare costs, to make $60 billion a year in profit. And like I said, I don't begrudge the business for it. You want some of those
to come off of that bill? If you want some of that to come off of that bill, I have heard that asking for an itemized receipt causes that number to go down very quickly.
Oh, it definitely does. But like the greater point, like I said, like if we're in a single payer system, hospitals can cut their administrative staffs by huge amounts because they don't have to pay for people to deal with insurance companies, or to deal with overdue billing and all that stuff, because it's just paid. Insurance companies, a lot of people aren't going to be employed at insurance companies anymore, but they'll find other jobs. And now
Honestly,
we won't have to pay for the
collection calls just feel like into a loan shark?
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
And like,
it's just like, okay, so how much can you give me this? Are you sure you can't give me more? Do I need to send Joey around?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Like,
and it gets obscene. Medicare, the most popular government program in the country, has an overhead cost of 2%. That's how much it costs. 2% of its budget goes to overhead costs. People talk about government being inefficient. Medicare is like government run programs are actually some of the most efficient in the country because they don't have a profit incentive, so they don't need to raise costs and pay administrators.
And then most of them run by the same rules.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Exactly, and so, like, I can talk. We've been talking about this for a half hour now, and I don't want to cut out because this is really important to me because, and I'm probably going to bring this up a lot more, because this is something that's been really important to me, as I mentioned at the start, for years upon years upon years, and the U.S. insurance system is a scam. Like, it is. It's scamming every American out of their money and their lives. And so we'll kind of leave it on that. We're going to take a short break. Even though it's recording, we're still going to take a little bit of a short break. And we'll be back in a couple minutes with our second topic, which should not get me quite as riled up. So we'll be right back. See you all in a couple minutes. Hey everyone, we are back with the Pagan Viewpoints. So, thanks again for watching this recording. We are that break was about 4 minutes long, a bit longer than normal. Hope you skip past it. You don't have to watch it. And the next one.
I think it'd be interesting to hear what they have to say. So many people have so many different. Who knows? We might get our next subject for our next episode.
Exactly.
So don't be shy, you guys.
Definitely. Yeah, so on to our second topic for the night, which is a bit of a lighter one. Won't be quite as riled up. And it's one that Alyssa's touched on it quite a few times. And it's something that as I've explored.
One of the first lessons young witchlings, people just starting out on a pagan path, because it's one of the more important life skills that is not taught during.
Yeah, and it's something that also I find is actually really relevant, kind of regardless of what. Well, hold on, minor technical difficulties. Be right back. Okay, we're back. Sorry guys, my internet cut out for a second, and this is a recording,
Technical
and
difficulties.
I don't have a ton of time, so I'm probably not going to edit that out. So, sorry.
There's technical difficulties, but what I was saying is our next topic is one of the things that I really like talking about early as possible with the new people starting out on their pagan journey, is separating your mundane experiences from your magical experiences in your mind, and realizing, the contradictory notions that they are separate yet overlap, and not indulging the freak out reflex every single time something happens.
Definitely, and it's something that I actually think applies across experiences, because something that it's a conversation that I've had for since I was like 14, so like 15 years, for people in any spirituality, anytime you're stepping into major spirituality, like really diving into it, with any sort of religion as well. Yes, like humans have this innate need to ascribe agency to everything, like it, and if you're really diving into spiritual experiences, everything you start to experience, you start to assign agency and action to, and it's such like a dangerous little like side trap.
Yeah. It goes into a spiral so quickly. And it's very much like what happens when you discover a new hobby or a new interest of any kind. It's like, ooh, look shiny. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, yay. And so, but this is much more deep and much more full. And so you start exploring your spirituality, you start exploring paganism and witchcraft, if you will, all of these other different things that you can do under that umbrella. And you end up being like Harry Potter on the first day in Diagon Alley, trying to swivel their head to look at literally everything. But all of the wizards that are used to it, they walk by that. They don't notice. Well, you notice. And it's fantastic to be that sensitive. And there's a reason to pay attention to that and note it for yourself and note it for the future and all of these other things. And it's great. It's just that it's very much like watching an 11-year-old try and swivel their head 360 to watch everything in sight, even if that's not the important thing you're supposed to be paying attention to. It drives all of us that have been doing this a while teensy bit crazy, just teensy bit.
Yeah.
So I would encourage them when you're looking at something and you're just like, that's magic. Yes, it is. But is it also natural. Let's bring ourselves back down and grounded back into this 3D reality we've taken so much time and put so much effort into corporealizing ourselves into.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be in the here and be in the now, because that's the point.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because I've been in multiple situations where, like all of a sudden, either myself or someone I'm with is all of a sudden, like, super into this spiritual thing, and we're like diving really hardcore into this belief, and all of a sudden, like, every flicker of the lights, because it's winter and blizzardy and windy, and all of a sudden the lights flicker, and all of a sudden it's just like, ha ha. That was a spirit. That was an angel, or something else.
I have family who do that. Here's the sad thing, though. I have family. I am from a family of witches. I have family who have been witches my whole life. Still do that.
Yeah.
Like, no, you have a 50-year-old house with bad wiring. That's not great grandma coming back to tell you that tell me that she agrees with you over me. That's not what's happening. What's happening is you're about to have an attic fire.
Yeah.
And so it's
so
the
same. It's the same mentality.
Magic doesn't mean your life is the supernatural or theory.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same mentality that leads to people just all of a sudden, like, really getting into numerology. And being like, ooh, I suddenly see the same number over and over and over and over again. And that's just your brain ascribing patterns. That's all it is.
Well, I mean, it's also, it's your brain, the pattern's always been there.
Exactly.
Your brain is noticing it. And so it's the same thing with the basic manifestation starter trick. You know, to help you to sort of rev yourself up into really understanding, you know, how does it work. There are those ones where it's like, okay, so sit down and for like 10 minutes, imagine your favorite animal in realistic visualization, and then watch that animal continue to appear throughout your day. Or pick an animal you don't particularly like or never flippin' see.
Yeah, exactly.
We know it's a mind trick.
Yeah, now that you've become attuned to something and recognize it as real and that it exists, you see it everywhere. It's a super common phenomenon. When you buy a new car,
a lot of people think that this proves the manifestation theory, but the fact of the matter is that exactly proves, because all of these vibes, everyone wants to be a part of these paths, everyone wants to be a part of. They exist everywhere, all the time, all at the same. You don't have to go to a certain place to go and be a part of that path. You don't have to do any certain thing to be included in that. And so then taking a moment and bringing your energy and your mindset into sync with this other vibration, and doing so on your will, gives you literally the key to the universe that will allow you to move yourself through these vibrations. You're not actually manipulating the universe. You never were. That is not how magic works. You are using your energy to interact with the universe towards a specified and quantifiable result.
Yeah.
That is magic.
Like these things always existed, and they were already there. And now you're just aware of them.
Until your perspective, you don't see a perspective, you know, until your brain and thus your energy is in sync with it. It's there.
Yeah,
you just don't see it. It's like, I'm not in sync with my hairbrush today, and I cannot flip and find it and I bet you in like 20, 30 minutes or something after this recording I'm going to look over and like right on my desk is going to be the flipping brush. I know it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And
but I cannot see it.
It's the same phenomenon that millions of Americans go through every single year when they buy a new car. They've never seen this car anywhere before. And now all of a sudden they see it everywhere they go. It's because now you realize that this thing exists.
I'm planning on getting myself one of those little like conversion shuttle vans that they use to take kids to and from preschool, those real big ones.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I am seeing them everywhere.
Exactly. Exactly, and
because
they
it's
always
on my
existed.
mind.
They always existed.
They were always there. I just never saw them because
They
I wasn't
fade into
ever
the
thinking
background.
about it. This is hard enough. Like, dominance is hard enough for someone with ADHD and all the other issues that I have. And then you add magic into it. I am prone to thinking that things are a sign, even if they're not. And the only reason why I don't end up looking like one of these psychopathic pixie girls is because over time and through experience, I've realized there are inside freakouts and there are outside freakouts.
Yeah.
And they are not mixy things. So
Yeah.
you've got to get used to it. You got to build up a callus,
Yeah.
if you will, become accustomed to it. It's like when you're learning to drive and you become more accustomed to merging. Okay, I'm comfortable merging in here with this sedan. My heart's still going to jump into my throat when I jump in next to a
Exactly.
It's natural.
And that's
it's
why
normal.
whenever you're, like, the kind of the point of this whole topic, which is where you're just diving into something, it's awesome. You should be excited and proud. But you should also enter, as something that we've discussed extensively on the show, and we'll talk a lot more, with an abundance of mindfulness and awareness of the actual space and world around you.
Well, I mean, that was my point. Well, part of my point, though, it goes into that because we preach that so very often that I feel as though so very many of the younger ones I'm talking to nowadays, one of the questions that I'm getting in my direct message and TikTok are having to do with the when can they step on the gas pedal, and they're perfectly ready for it, but they're still just taking those baby steps and be a little too extra cautious. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is, just like the metaphor with the I would still have my heart jump into my throat if I'm merging and there's an 18-wheeler bearing down on me. I don't know if they're going to swerve out of that lane. If you are meant to be affected by something, if it's meant to really catch your attention, it's gonna. It's gonna. So don't nitpick the little tiny itty-bitty signs in your life. Those are just there to show you the coincidence, to show you, yes, this has been happening consistently, and then bing, that's definitely a sign. And all of these other things coincide with it. But to go and nitpick every tiny itty-bitty little thing, you are losing the forest for the sake of the trees.
Yep. Exactly.
And you can't do it. You have to pull yourself back, and you have to say, okay, it's significant to me, but is it one of those things that I need to trump the entire village from the hilltop? You know? And you need to everyone needs to take stock of that, and they need to gain their own balance, and that comes with time, so don't be too embarrassed if you've been this way. But just know that if you find a feather on your front porch, it's not necessarily from the fae. It could just very well be that you have a weird wind tunnel on your porch at 3 a.m. and there's a bird's nest over there yonder. Like if I find a big, large leaf of a tree that is not anywhere near me as far as I can tell, I assume, okay, so somewhere down the street there is a tree like this. I don't assume that I'm under attack.
Yeah. Because you don't want to trade, because that's the big thing, is that the heart of both science and spirituality is to always be questioning, and you don't want to exchange just blind devotion and faith in one thing for another.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. That's why we all have so many journals. We're trying to keep track. Okay, what's a coincidence, what's not? And that's one of the reasons why grimoires and magical family poems are so precious, because then we don't have to go through that trial and error process on our own. We can pull from of our ancestors directly. They're in the written word. They're so rare. And then you don't have to do that trial and error. You don't have to do that of work, because look, here's that 20 years of work.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like science.
But then you still have to do the experiment. You still have to do the experiments yourself and get that same result at least.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like science.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's
Most of the
have
science
faith in what came
fields that we
before.
have started out as a form of spirituality. Modern day
Mm-hmm.
chemistry started as alchemy. You try and
Exactly.
take one thing, mix it with another, it turns into something else.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
then they
and
then they
so-
perfected it more in the mundane world, took some of that spirituality, mysticism, and so that's not our thing to do anymore so
Mhm.
much.
Exactly. And
And so they're fine. That has to do with the physical world, and if they say that's the way it is, they're the ones that studied it. So science and magic do exist simultaneously. The science is just the understanding of the simulation. Magic is the act of manipulation.
exactly, and that's
You can't tell me laser beams aren't magic. You can't tell me You can't tell me cell phones are not magic. What is making this cell phone that is recording me right now work? What? It's stones and plasticky bits and things that we created in random shapes and symbols that for some reason. And
there's a lot of science behind it.
It's magic.
Yeah.
It's magic, though. It is. Like, it's science. It is for sure science. And I know that there are people who fully understand how this fantastic piece of machinery works. But it is magic. It is 100% magic. It is a magic stone I hold in my hand. And it shows me the universe. It is Beauty and the Beast's magic mirror, only without the tragic father background and way more cat videos. Like, it is magic.
Yeah. And
So,
it's a
and
great place.
I want them to notice the magic in everyday life as much as I want them to be able to differentiate. I do want them to experience that magic. Just, you've got to hold yourself in a state of reasonability.
Yeah. Which is a great place
Otherwise
to leave
you
off.
start sounding wackadoodle.
So separate. Be willing to separate the magic from your daily experience. It's kind of the way that it is.
If you start functioning at too high of an energy frequency, just as you never understood that until you got there, nobody else on a lower frequency is going to be able to understand you, and you're going to think you're a wacky.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think it's a great place
It doesn't.
to leave this topic for this episode.
I think we
can
move on to our next topic.
And so we're just going to take a tiny break. This one will be much shorter. And we will be right back.
Hey, babe. When you can.
And we are back with the pagan viewpoint. Yeah, we're coming up on our last topic here. And so this is going to be a fun one. There are definitely opinions on this, and we might incur the wrath of a certain segment of the vegetarian and vegan community.
But it is something that I think is extremely important. I think it's extremely important, and if they are willing to hear me out, I think that they'll probably see things my way, but I hope.
Perhaps. We'll have to see. Yeah, so this...
Don't hunt me.
Yeah, so this topic, it's a fun one. It's something that a lot of people have strong opinions on. And it's livestock ethics. A lot of people are going vegetarian and vegan for a lot of reasons. Some health related, some environment related, and some ethics related. Some people just don't think animals should die, or even that we should exploit animals for animal products to use and consume, which is vegan. So
I have an awful lot of opinions, because when I have the opportunity, I choose a vegetarian vegan option. And in fact, having two roommates in here who are vegetarian has given me a lot of different things to explore with lately. But one thing that I keep in whenever I go and research new recipes or anything else is always this, the mentality of the people who are teaching you these recipes is always shared during their videos. They're just talking, they're giving a commentary, but it always seems to include having to do with the fact that no human should have, these domesticated animals anymore. All of these animals, because they're not pets, should be, left wild. And that's just not possible, is the problem. Because there are animals like sheep, this first one that I go to, they were one of the simultaneously simplest and most complicated to domesticate, but they were domesticated so long ago that most of the domesticated sheep species that we have don't actually shed their own wool. It just never falls out, hardly ever. And so then there'll be these cases where these sheep, they will go off into the wilderness, they'll get lost in a field and just never come in, and they don't find them for a year or so, and then they will come in and they will just have layer upon layer of wool that's just caked onto them with mud and other things stuck into it, to the point that they can hardly move. They have skin problems. They're being overheated because of the temperature of the wool layered on top of them. And then when they get to try and cool off, they get stuck in mud puddles and drown. And I hate to put it so bluntly, but I think that someone who most definitely, like many of the vegan people, watched the videos that showed the horrors of the corporate farming, as I like to call it, this industrial farming monster that we have. And understandably, they were horrified. But I believe that that's just, in some cases, taken a bit too far. There are species out there that we desperately need in our ecosystems, in our environments, that if we tried to let them be purely wild, it would not work. They would go extinct.
Yeah.
Because so used to overproducing honey, and then they get honey drunk. There starts to be invasions that they will go and they will start what's it called, when they fly about in a big angry group.
Swarming?
Swarming, yeah, they'll start swarming and other things like this, which would be very dangerous for other beings as well as themselves. And so I think that, yes, we should most definitely cut down on our meat production and the meat that we consume. I think that we should, slowly but surely eliminate it completely as feasibly possible. But at the end of the day, we can't let those species go extinct. And as the beings that domesticated them and changed their form, we have a responsibility to take care of those beings.
Well, yeah, and so, um, look, we've been genetically modifying many of these species for thousands of years, um, and so like we've been selectively breeding animals to pass on certain traits for literal millennia, and we've done so well as a species that exactly many of these species gotten to the point where they can't function. Like there are several examples of chickens with breasts now so large they can't walk.
And there are also examples, though, of chickens that had been gotten loose. They were more of a regular kind, did go wild.
Yeah.
And so it is possible. I just think that if we are going to eliminate animal husbandry from our collection of skills that we use, we should most definitely take upon ourselves the responsibility of returning those species that we altered in the first place to a more natural form that would allow them to function on their own, rather than just dropping the way that so many people seem to suggest, as though Mother Nature is going to be kind. Mother Nature is not kind.
Yeah, and
Mother Nature will destroy them.
And I'm of two minds with these things. A big part of me wants to say, we should go through the work of over several generations, continuing to genetically modify these beings, these animals, back to the point where they can live in the wild on their own. But then another part of me is of the mind that a lot of these animals shouldn't exist in the first place. Like we've created them, and so to the point where they could almost be considered a separate species at this point. And so at what point is it would it make sense to be like, well, we just won't breed them anymore at all?
At that point it does, in my mind, become a form of genocide, because it is a life form, and it did have its own authentic regular form in the wild before we changed it, like dogs and cats, like that, before we changed. But just because we changed it doesn't mean that it's illegitimate. We are part of nature. We are not separate from it. And so then nature altering nature is also nature.
Well, yeah.
And so I'm not saying that we, it's the best option. But I am saying that when it comes to these new standards that we hold, that we're trying to implement species-wide across culture, we have to be consistent, and also we have to realize that there are people who that is their function, that is their job, to take care of and be with those beings, at least for the next several hundred years, as far as many of my diviners can tell. So taking that away from them, that's taking away their purpose as well. And it doesn't balance out to just drop it. It feels as though we're dropping our responsibility, leaving the mess where it lies. Whereas if we allow them, with our knowledge and expertise that we gained off of their suffering in the first place, and we use to make their life better, make it capable of doing what they would have naturally been able to do anyway, something we can discern now because we're advanced enough, and then we let it lie, well, then that sounds to me like a far smoother lane.
Yeah, well, and like I said, it's the reason that bring it is because there's a really good ethical debate to be had about like is it ethical to now begin to purposely breed them to go out and affect natural ecosystems, to introduce what is essentially an invasive species into an ecosystem, because that's what we're doing.
That is a good question.
And
but
so
there's also, because that question can be asked, there's an opportunity to address it long before these beings are ever released.
Well, and that's why though it's important.
They could very well end up filling a niche and taking a place of something that was supposed to be there and then wasn't.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, though, is that that a huge part of the ravages that the human race has inflicted upon this planet has been us determining what we think is best for the natural environment, and trying to determine what should live, what should die, trying to introduce new things to new places because we think it's the right thing to do. And who knows, maybe it could be the right thing to do. But I've started to come to the conclusion that, well, maybe the ethical thing is, it's really unfortunate, but maybe it's best to let, because several will, because here's the thing, if today we stopped dealing with livestock at all as a species, right, there's a subsection of available animals who would survive in the wild. They exist, because of genetic variation. And those animals, if fit, as long as we didn't interfere, might live or die over the long term. We don't know. We have no way of knowing.
We don't know.
And if we were to do that, part of me questions that would be the right thing to do. I lean towards yes.
The funny thing, as you're talking, the reason why I'm smiling is because I don't think. Let me introduce this new idea. The difference between human arrogance and the correction of human arrogance is very. Where are we taking our direction? Are we taking it from our ego, or are we taking it from what is actually best to happen? So by taking note of exactly what you're talking about, nature, the people who are killing these animals, go and start handling them in a more natural environment, and then see how they do, and make sure that the ones that survive better are the ones who get the opportunity to breed, and then once that's the primary part of the species, then we're hands off. It's the same thing, my friend. The only difference is that instead of being like, all right, just let all of these other things die, the difference is that we still take care of that other portion if we don't let them.
Yeah, well, because
that's our responsibility as a society that causes this mess at the first.
Well, because that's part of the thing is I even often looked at our attempts as a species to preserve other species, species that we haven't domesticated.
But I also compare that to, if you will, making a mess on a beach and then saying the natural processes will clean it up eventually.
Well, yeah, but that's what I mean is part of it
won't be in a nice way.
Yeah,
and it's also the same that goes into magical things as well. The less you put into the spell, the less you put into the ritual, the fewer instructions and tiny details you cover with the construction of your rituals or your circles or crystals or the ingredients you put in your potion, what have you. The more is left to random natural chance. Mother Nature is not kind. Witchcraft exists because Mother Nature is not kind, because we are trying to in some way tame her.
Yeah.
So if we want a disaster, then most certainly we would leave the mess, but that's going to cause an awful lot of disasters for a lot of the other creatures that weren't affected and wouldn't have been affected.
Because where I was kind of going a little bit is, so there's a lot of species that, because of human action, particularly actually the mass raising of livestock,
Mm-hmm.
are on the verge of going extinct.
Yeah.
Several that have gone extinct through mass hunting and
Yeah.
mass farming and mass livestock production.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're making a conservative effort, conservation-wise, to preserve a lot of these species, to prevent them
Yeah.
from going extinct.
Yeah.
And there's a strong, like, it's a difficult ethical question to so like we drove them to extinction, so you can
Yeah.
make the strong ethical argument that we have a responsibility because of our action they were driven to extinction, so we should keep them alive. But then there's another ethical argument that, like, just continued intervention after intervention after intervention. You keep trying to fix a problem.
That's what I'm talking about, though. Because they're aiming towards keep them alive, and they're never getting to the until portion of that. Because there's another portion of that equation, and nobody ever talks about it. And the until is until they don't need us.
Yeah, but then, like I said,
now,
it
how
starts
is
to
that
beg
going to
the.
happen?
It
Now,
starts.
how? It's like the giant panda. It survives entirely on bamboo. And one of the reasons it's going extinct in the wild is because the forests of bamboo are being depleted. Well, so it's going extinct. We're trying to keep it alive. Well, so now that we're trying to keep it alive, right? It is then our responsibility as a part of that, and always has been, unacknowledged, but it is there, and it needs to be said and listed, that we need to be able to restore the environment it came from, that we destroyed, which caused it to then start going extinct.
Well,
so until their environment is restored.
Yeah, well, because the thing too is, like, pandas are also terrible at keeping themselves alive.
They really are. In which case, if we manage to restore their environment and release them back into the wild, and they live a few generations and then they gone, hey, it's up to them at that point. That's more about them than it is about us.
Yeah, because the big thing is, like, because we continue, like I said, we continue to try and keep these species alive, because humans are the cause of a mass extinction event. But in our efforts to keep these species alive,
and I think it says a tremendous.
Are we preventing the emergence of new species and new?
I don't believe so.
Environments?
I don't believe so, because there are still billions of species of beings that are being discovered on a daily basis. Things we didn't know about, things that are alterations of old things and hybrids of old things, and it's not keeping another coming about. It's just keeping the calamity portion of that equation that happens when it happens naturally to a minimum, so as to not cause any more collateral.
Like I said, there's this concept
if we just drop it, well, then we're dropping a bunch of beings that we created into an environment that was never suited for them. They're not suited for that environment. We have nowhere for them to go, and then went into the wild being environment.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to get pushed out. Well, so then our responsibility to those other beings, in order to not have our creation infringe on them, is that we keep our control of them until we no longer have to keep our control of them.
Well, and that's where, like I said, the big part of me is, like, is this whole concept of, like, human arrogance and human intervention, because at some point, like, we could potentially try to stop an asteroid or comet from hitting the planet, which can, in a lot of the ways, could be objectively considered a good thing, because the human race will survive.
I think that this policy, I think that this policy that are not supposed to affect the outside world is I believe that it's misinformed.
Yeah, well,
we've always been meant to affect the outside world. The difference is going on here is that when we weren't conscious of our actual effect, when we didn't understand what we were actually doing, when we were children and didn't know any better, we made a ginormous mess. Well, now our species is in its early adulthood. We've started to notice and realize what we did wrong.
Yeah,
We
well, and
can't just leave it that way.
that's what gets so complicated. Like, what makes this so messy is human self-awareness. Um,
Yes,
like, we're aware of
but in the
ourselves.
process of fixing, in the process of making the mess, we learned a lot, right?
Yeah, and
In the
so
process of cleaning up the mess, we're going to learn a lot.
yeah,
And then after we have cleaned up the mess, the things we do moving forward are going to depend on the things that we learned by cleaning up the mess.
yeah. Well, and
So
like,
if we don't clean up the mess, if we just drop it, we're not going to have the tools necessary to move forward. Then we're going to keep making these same mistakes over and over again.
well, and that's why, like I said, like, it just comes in like what amount of human, hold on, I had the word and then I lost it. What amount of human interference, like, or human programming, I should say, direction of the world is too much, because that's the thing, right? Because I don't want to get into like the logical fallacy of a slippery slope argument. But we have to agree that there is a limit to how humans.
You do have to talk about it.
And so it begs the question, like, is the limit being like we affected the environment so much through our domestication of these animals, right? So much through it, like we brought them out of the natural flow of the environment.
I see each and every one of them as a toxic, as a container of toxic sludge. And it's just waiting to spill over into the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Every one of these domesticated animals is just a big container, big metal container of toxic sludge. So I don't know if you ever saw this one movie. And what was it called? It was, there was this one, I'm going to have to look it up at some point to show it to you, but I digress. There are these times where toxicities will just leach out into the environment. They're just dumps, right? Like there's a train wreck, there's a shipwreck, there's a, something pumping something from the core of the earth busted, right? Mm-hmm. We can't leave those things.
Yeah.
We can't. Because it causes so much more of a trouble. Well, these domesticated animals are the same thing.
Well, and that's
if we drop them, then it's just the same thing as just that mess there.
Well, and that's
leaving
why
the oil in the water, leaving the plastic on the beach.
And that's why, like, in that analogy, like I said, imagine each animal is just a barrel of nuclear waste, right? Each domesticated animal.
Each one.
Like, what I would do.
Each one that we clean up, each tiny mess we clean up, we learn from.
Yeah,
how to not make that mess
But
again.
the big thing is, like, in that analogy, like, because I like the analogy, like, my response would be, well, get rid of it. Like, don't figure out a way to safely get rid of it, and don't produce more.
But that's trying to bend the rules of nature. You don't get to do that.
Well, but
you don't get to just say, oh, you don't get to exist anymore because you're inconvenient. We've created you, but you're inconvenient to this now, so you don't get to exist anymore. Because that's not, it's a type of toxicity, yes, but it is also at the same time a living being.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, it's part of it is, to me, it's like the best response is stop reading them, right? Like, for number one, stop reading them, and then like essentially let it die out, and then whatever's left at the end that can basically go into nature, is then let it go. And if it survives, it survives. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
But it's going to take several generations in order to do that. And the problem is, in order to keep away from the natural wild environment, these beings, until this mass die-out does inevitably happen, because they're overpopulated to begin.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's the thing.
Until that happens, we do have to keep them out of that natural environment.
Well, but the big part for me is
someone has to continue to mind them.
Like, I would basically do it over a single generation. Is how I would.
That's too quick.
And because that's the thing is like I said, I look at it and I see just like I'm not saying we go through and we just slaughter all of it, right?
No, I
like all of it,
but
the big part is,
those alterations. modifications that are going to be necessary in order for that species in some form to survive and possibly evolve into its greatest form, that cannot be allowed to that's just like dropping.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't think we should continue to modify them at all.
At that point, well, see, I don't think we need to modify them. I think we need to care for them and take responsibility
but that's a big
them
part
until nature modifies.
But that's the thing is that's just continuing to breed them.
But if you let them go in one generation, you're saying you don't want to slaughter all of them. You might as well just go ahead and slaughter the majority of them.
But that's the thing. I figure let them live out to their old age, right? Care for them up until that point. And quick technical glitch. I'm probably actually going to edit that out, so you might not even have noticed. But yeah, like I said, it's to me, it's.
I just feel like
really
it's shirking our responsibilities for the sake of convenience because it would happen faster that way, and I never feel like that's.
Well, and to me,
I don't think it's the responsible thing to do, and I think that for what we're trying to evolve into, that's that.
Like I said, it's everything we do, because we're so self-aware, we recognize that it has consequences, which leads to an ethical debate. And we have to decide.
The question is, are we going to indulge the entire...
I think our goal ethically as humanity towards nature in general is let's try to intervene as little as possible.
Yes, that's why I said that our place is supposed to be a place of care.
And like I said, I see continuing to even like take all these domesticated animals and continuing to care for them until they breed to a point where we feel they can survive in nature, is us making a determination about what can and cannot survive in nature, what should and should not survive, and
but then you have to think of the ethical consequences of just basically sentencing an entire species that we created to death because we don't want to deal with them anymore. It's ethically difficult and painful for us to do so. And nature on this planet, which they weren't bred for, they were bred for us. Nature on this planet is not, helpful to them. We need to return to these species what we stole.
Which is why, like, the other part of me
that's my stance.
Is for the most part, like, we should probably slaughter is a huge point, and honestly just keep the rest as pets. A small subsection of it. Similar to dogs.
Maybe. I mean, that might be a small thing. I certainly wouldn't mind a pet.
I think it's the middle path. Like a pet.
If we're going to go the ethical path, if we really are going to go the ethical path, and that's what we're going to be thinking about, then the questions that we have to ask ourselves are always going to be hard and uncomfortable. But the big question is, are we going to enforce those ethical standards before or after the mess is fixed?
Well,
because if it's before the mess is fixed, we're walking straight back into a whole different kind of mess.
Well, and that's why, like,
it's either applicable now or it will not be applicable in the future.
That's why part of it is, like, we've removed these animals from the natural flow of evolution. The natural flow. That we've done the same thing with dogs.
But then it's our decision that they are then not worthy of life and existence.
But that's why part of me is saying we've removed them. So now that we've removed them, we have an obligation to just keep them separate. But continuing to farm them for livestock is unethical.
Continuing to farm them is most definitely not ethical. But what I'm saying, though, is that I don't believe that we have a responsibility to keep them with us as pets forever. I believe that we have a responsibility to attempt to return to them what we had stolen. And if not that, then the closest thing we do.
Well, and that's
because
why part
we
of
stole
me is
from them by removing them from nature and altering them the way that we did.
But they've basically reached pet status at this point. Like, that's
I don't think they're past it. Like, I do not think that they're past the capability of evolving back into what they would have if we had left them alone.
Dogs are 100% domesticated, straight up. And
And they
if
can
every
most certainly
human,
go back wild
if
fairly
every
quickly.
human were to die today, every human were to cease to exist today, a vast majority of dog breeds would be perfectly fine in the wild. A huge chunk of them would. And I
The
tend to
problem
take.
is that the effect they would have on the environment around them would be just as detrimental to those other animals.
To be honest, yes and no. Because the other thing too is
I mean,
I'll
just
get
look
into-
at
I
the
get into
kill
this
rate
argument-
of regular domesticated
well,
cats.
I look into this get in this argument a lot with conservationists who say like hunting is a good thing because it helps keep down the like it helps maintain ecosystems by keeping all these like deer and turkeys and all that stuff populations under control, and rabbits and all that stuff under control. And I'm just like, the only reason that you have to do that is because we spent 2 centuries killing all their natural predators.
Yes, that is true.
And
But
so
until we are able to reintroduce in a way that doesn't harm those same natural predators, we've taken on the responsibility
and
of
that's why-
being those predators.
well, and that's why part of me is literally just like, we kind of just gotta stop interfering.
Well,
We just gotta
we
stop
have to
until
stop
we,
interfering.
because we keep
But-
talking about until we can do this
but
thing.
that's what I'm talking about it. That's why I'm talking about it, my friend, because we're not going to be able to stop interfering, and we're not going to stop making this mistake until we stop leaving our mess where it lies, because obviously nature is a better choice than us. It's
Well,
not
because
human
that's why
arrogance.
we keep
It's
trying
that
to
we've
fix it.
matured. Well, we don't need to fix it. We just need to not break it.
Well, and that's why, like I said, part of me is just like, maybe we
It
just need to
fixes
stop.
itself.
Stop everything.
It fixes itself, but if we just drop it on nature, what are we to be dropping
Nature will
our mess
still
on
fix
nature
itself.
to clean up? It
'Cause-
will, but why should it?
But
Because
that's the
going
thing.
to cause so much
But
bigger
that's the
of a
thing
thing.
is like we continually try to just fix and fix and fix and fix and fix.
But
and,
then there are those occasions in which if we don't, then nothing gets done and the whole environment just completely crumbles. Look at the difference between the waterways that have had freshwater clams introduced into them as opposed to the ones that have been left alone. The ones that have been left alone have remained polluted. Well, the ones that have been left alone, that then remains human hand. That remains the human responsibility. It remains a scar on our planet, which remains a scar on our record.
Yeah,
And so until we have fixed that scar on our record is not going away. And it doesn't matter how much we ignore it or sweep it under the couch or talk about ethical.
Well, the fact is like
we
is
need
kind
to
of a fact
fix it so
where-
it's fixed and then drop it.
where if like every human
If
were
we just drop it when it's a mess.
like if every human disappeared today, almost every single
Nature would survive, and I get that.
well, almost
But
every single
you're not-
scar we've left would be solved within a century.
Actually, but what you have to understand, though, is that is a century of calamity after calamity after calamity after calamity after
Yeah.
calamity.
Humans
Because
are the
when
calamity.
nature cleans up a mess, it is not simple. And the fact of the matter is that as much as we like to focus on these thoughts of if human beings didn't exist on Earth tomorrow all at once, those things are not going to happen as far if any of us have anything to say about it. So we're still gonna be here. So as much as that is, it's cathartic.
Well,
it's
to me,
food
it's
for the
it's more
soul
about the
to think about. It's
the
just not going to
clarity-
happen,
it's the
and
clarity
we
of the
have
discussion.
to. But we're not going to disappear, and thus we have to pick up that mess and clean it up. We have no choice, because it doesn't matter if we made the mess. Doesn't matter what our intentions are when the mess was made. At the end of the day, you just got to go with the mommy. I don't care who drug the mud in on the carpet. I need the mud to not be on the carpet. I need the mess to be fixed. It doesn't matter that over time that mud is going to wear away and people are going to take off chunks of it and it's going to dry and it's going to turn into dust and it's going to get spread. No, get the mud off the carpet. So it's just like if we leave it to nature, that to me is just like we're dropping our mess where it lies. And we're just saying, no, I just fucked it up, so I'm not going to try anymore, and I'm just going to leave this to something else, and we're just going to, okay, well, it's a tragedy. That's such a tragedy. Thoughts and prayers. whatever it feels like to me. It feels like thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
And so I can't do it.
And I feel like we're going to be on opposing sides on this.
And if I see something and I can do something to make it easier for life to exist, I will do that.
Because part of me, to use the same analogy, I look at it as the fact that say you spilled some red grape juice on like a red sweater, like there's just a spot of it, and so you just take a soap, sponge, and wet water to it, and you just try to scrub it out because it's you ruin the tablecloth, and you're trying to clean it up, and the more you scrub, the bigger the mess gets, and you just keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and the mess keeps getting worse and worse and worse until you're left with taking such extreme drastic measures to get rid of it, or you just have to.
I'm hijacking your metaphor. I'm hijacking your metaphor, because the thing is that we often come up against those things in nature, in life, in health, and all of the things that we talk about. We come against those messes that we encounter. We don't expect them. They're interrupting our day. And every time we try to address it, it just seems to become a bigger mess. Mm-hmm. But you can't just chuck it in the bucket and move on, my friend.
Well, at some point,
not if it's something that matters. Not if it's grandma's tablecloth. Not if it's great grandma's tablecloth. It's like, okay, so if someone accidentally somehow dabs onto the Declaration of Independence, we're not just going to be like, okay, we're not going to clean this up. We're going to restore it to the best of our ability, which we do.
We essentially
have
reached
the
this
ability
point.
to do. It's just a matter of knowledge. It's a matter of doing it effectively. It's a matter of having a plan. It's a matter of actually thinking about it when we're doing it.
Well, and we kind of reached this point.
And how we're going to do it.
Like I said, we kind of reached this point though where like we can clean it up, but we have to use extreme methods to do so. And the question is, what? Sorry, you cut out for a second.
So far.
Yeah, well, exactly. But the question is, like, at what point? At what point do we just sit back and be like, okay, cool, we can take extreme measures to clean this mess, or we stop. And
if we stop, there's a bigger mess.
Well, that's the thing
if the mess spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads, and the problem that I don't think you're understanding is if the natural environment as it is experienced right now is inevitably infected more, which is why we're trying to stop it in the first place. If it is affected in any way by our no longer taking responsibility for this mess, well, then you have cascade failure, and we all in the bucket.
Well, and that's why, like I said, before I started the metaphors, like we're probably going to continue to stay on opposite sides of this.
Probably,
because
but I just don't
I look at it and I say,
a mess is the right thing to do.
And I think at some point you just look and you say, well, you know what? Like we're gonna stop intervening, and we're just gonna do our best to make sure the mess doesn't get bigger.
Because the mess cleans itself up on its own.
And that's it. And we need to stop trying to clean it. We need to stop trying to do anything. We just contain the damage as best we can and move on, which is, to me, like, it's incredibly non-interventionist. It's just stopping.
But it's not a matter of just stopping, though, because it's never just as easy as just stopping. There will never be a time in our living history, as far as I'm aware, that there won't be a need for cattle farmers, for people to care for those cattle and those domesticated animals that we have been farming.
Is we can just make the choice
so trying to just be like, no one can farm animals anymore, that's not going to work.
Well, like, we can already grow meat. We can just grow it. We can just grow meat cells.
Well, yeah. So, it's not a matter of the needing of the meat. It's not a matter of the needing of the meat.
Like,
it's a matter.
Well, and that's why part is just let them go.
But if you let them go, then they die. But if you let them go, not only do they die, but those bird species dies, and that type of mite dies, and these type of things die, and this type of disease gets loose, and all of that species dies. It would be more kind to literally just slaughter the lot if we are not going to take care of them.
But no, when I said let them go,
all day.
When I said let them go, what I meant is let the species go.
But letting them live age, it's not just their breeding with each other and spreading that's the difficulty. It's the diseases they can contract and spread. Yeah. It's the difference they make physically on the environment they fraud upon. It would be kinder to just murder the lot and let nature take over the space. Yeah. Authentically on itself with no interference, than it would be to allow those creatures, those monstrosities we've created over these centuries, to be let loose on an environment that did nothing to flip wrong to you in the first place. You already did it once. It seems like we slapped nature in the face, and then
that's part of what I think we should do. Again. That's what I meant.
I don't think we need to slap nature in the face by hitting it twice. No, I meant
the same it's just slaughtering. We'll just get rid of. Like at some point,
that would if we're not going to be willing to
because I think we could.
And then yes, that would be.
I think at some point we should stop.
That'd be the fastest way to do it. It wouldn't actually allow us to pay for our crimes, and we would recreate this same mistake over and over and over again for another few thousand years. But yes, for the immediate problem, it would definitely cause a very quick fix.
Well, the point would be to.
The problem is I want it entirely.
Yeah, but
I
the point
to stop being a mistake it's created.
Is like we recognize that what we've done is wrong.
But recognizing that what we've done is wrong is not enough.
And we can't do it anymore. And part of not doing it anymore is accept the consequence, which is like literally the shame as a species of having created something that has to die.
No. Because we as humans, we are not going to hold shame in our space as a species, and we are not going to manifest more shame to be dealt with by holding shame in our own species, rather than taking the responsibility necessary to return what was stolen from nature and clean up our own mess. I won't allow it. If I am the only one standing on that hill, so be it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I'm not going to have my great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren cleaning up this same mess and having this same argument over again. We're going to fix this time. But if what your path is for, then that is exactly why all of the diversity in the human species is so incredibly necessary towards us cleaning up our own mess. Because there's always going to be someone who's interested in doing that. And that is the positive note that hopefully gets through there.
Yeah, because like I said,
I get heated on some of these subjects, and we've been going around in circles for a while. So
have strong opinions on this, and and it's like livestock ethics is like what to do with livestock is a tough conversation.
It is
because
it really
humans
is. And
have
it's a conversation
big
I've had
responsibility
to be having lately. Our ultimate plan, my husband and I, the rest of our family, our whole tribe, basically, is get land and live out there on land sustainably.
Yeah.
And not all of the people who are going to be living there are going to be vegetarian.
Yeah. And so
how are we going to do that sustainably? And so then we have to think about those things.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something I've thought about before. And I wanted to close with this. Just like I said, it's a difficult conversation that humanity has a big responsibility for and needs to be having. And much of humanity is ignoring it at the moment. And
the conversation is
and the solution
difficult,
isn't simple.
And it does need to happen. It gets heated.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own different opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was responding to someone over on the side who wasn't even supposed to be talking to me.
but I think that's where we'll leave it tonight and this week. I don't have...
Yeah, so we should go ahead and we should say our goodbyes and let you get to your resting and
Yeah.
your convalescence.
Yeah,
I like that
definitely.
word, you guys. I do like that word. I'm going to introduce new words on my TikToks, I think.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I don't have a lot to end with, other than to say thank you for tuning in. It was nice to do this again, and
Yeah.
you should be watching this on Wednesday the 20th. So thank you, or anytime after that. It's very cool.
Yes, and please be safe today. I know that everything going on right now, politically, we didn't talk about politics on this one as much. I know that everything's getting heated, and all I can say out there is you guys stay safe.
Yeah, hopefully.
Please.
Yeah, hopefully nothing crazy went down with the inauguration today. Obviously, this is Tuesday. It's the night before the inauguration, so but this is going live
we
afterwards.
We are nervous.
So
we are
hopefully
very
nothing
nervous.
happens.
So just everyone, please stay safe and love each other and be kind to one another in the next few days. Okay.
Yeah, have a fantastic new presidency. So
hopefully. I am more interested, quite honestly, I'm more interested in the fact that we have a female of color who is a judge, a very highly educated person, as the vice president. I love that so much.
I agree. So thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next time.
So.
Bye.
Bye, you guys.